It's been a while, so let's look at some more licensed and tie-in games based on anime, comic books, and other IPs. Dragon Ball Z Boo's Fury is a 2004 action RPG developed by Webfoot Technologies for the Game Boy Advance. Webfoot has mainly worked on a lot of portable licensed games. Despite not being branded the same way as the other games, this game is the third entry in the DBZ Legacy of Goku series, a series of action RPGs for the GBA that covers the events of the Dragon Ball Z series, the second portion of Akira Toriyama's 1984 Dragon Ball manga when the protagonist Goku is an adult as he fights the various powerful foes who threaten Earth. Boo's Fury covers the events of the final major arc of the manga, the Majin Buu saga, when a wizard comes to Earth to revive an evil monster capable of destroying entire planets. While Dragon Ball was originally a manga, Boo's Fury takes a lot of influence from the Dragon Ball Z anime that ran from 1989 to 1996, as well as a few of the DBZ anime movies. The game's soundtrack is a GBA rendition of the Faulconer production score that was done for the Funimation English dub of the DBZ anime, a completely different soundtrack from the compositions used in the original Japanese dub. If you watch Dragon Ball Z on streaming services like Crunchyroll nowadays, you'll notice that they don't use the Faulconer production score, and instead they use the Japanese soundtrack for the series. I bring all of this up to say that because Boo's Fury uses the Faulconer Productions music, this game is a nice time capsule for what DBZ was like in the early to mid 2000s. The influence from the anime and the anime movies is one of my favorite parts about this game. The first chapter of the game covers the events of the Otherworld Tournament filler arc from the anime. Content from the Fusion Reborn movie gets used, and you even get to fight Broly. The combat for this game is pretty alright. You use the A button to punch enemies, hold the R button to block, you can hold R and B to form a barrier for even more defense, and by using the B button, you can use your character's special moves. Goku has his instant transmission that lets him teleport to attack faraway enemies, Vegeta has his Big Bang attack that can attack multiple enemies with its large hitbox, Trunks has his Flame Kamehameha that he can move up and down like a whip, etc. Aside from a few rare instances when you do get to play as other characters, there are 5 main playable characters in this game: Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, Goten, and Trunks. Sorry Piccolo fans, this is a Saiyan only game. And given that the characters are Saiyans, you can power up your character immensely by using your Super Saiyan transformation. Going Super Saiyan drastically increases your speed and power. One of the other ways you can increase your power is equipment. Equipment can be found or bought from the store, and these can raise your stats. Some equipment have special properties like the Goku hat, which gives you an extra stat point when you level up, and the weighted clothing, which slows your character's movement speed down, but in return it increases the amount of experience points you get from leveling up. When you level up, you get stat points, which you can then use to increase stats like strength and endurance. I think this is a cool mechanic since you can choose to upgrade different stats to sort of build your character your own way, but unfortunately this system completely breaks the game, as if you just pump all of your stat points into strength, you can completely destroy this game, defeating most enemies in 1 or 2 hits. Another thing that completely breaks this game is Super Saiyan, which I mentioned before. What makes it so OP is that it lasts a long time and it recharges very quickly. You can even use key refill items like milk and soda to stay in the transformation for even longer amounts of time. Another thing that makes this game feel mindless is that the bosses are a joke. Most of them you can just wail on and they can't do anything to stop you. I didn't experience any bugs or glitches, the game feels finished, it's just I think the issue is it needed a bit more time spent balancing it. My only other major complaint is that the game forces you to grind sometimes to get through these level gates, but besides that, and aside from the game being too easy, Boo's Fury is an enjoyable time. There's some nice sprite work, the renditions of the Faulconer Productions music tracks are fantastic. I like being able to fly around the map, it makes the game's locations seem like they're part of a fully realized world. Even Chapter 6 is fun, a whole chapter dedicated to you collecting all of the Dragon Balls, which is probably the most egregious example of padding in the game, considering in the anime it only takes the characters like 1 episode to collect the Dragon Balls, and in the manga it's done off screen. This chapter easily has the most variety in the amount of cool locations you go to, like a train running through a desert, a secret forest ninja stronghold, and an airship factory inside of an airship. I remember not liking this chapter as a kid because it felt like the main plot of the game wasn't really going anywhere and it was just a bunch of running around looking for items to progress the plot. But I actually really like this portion of the game now. Even with the optional stuff you can do, the game isn't all that long, especially for an RPG. The only thing really holding this game back is the difficulty, but for what it's worth, I still had a good time. Invincible Presents Adam Eve is a 2023 visual novel RPG developed by Terrible Posture Games. This game is based on the 2003 superhero comic book Invincible by Robert Kirkman, Corey Walker, and Ryan Ottley. Invincible is about a teenager named Mark Grayson, the son of the most famous superhero on Earth, Omni-Man. Mark finally gets superpowers after years of being a normal kid, and now he must enter the brutal, unforgiving world of being a superhero. Invincible Presents Adam Eve is about one of the main characters of the comic, Samantha Eve Wilkins, better known by her hero name, Adam Eve, who has the ability to manipulate objects on an atomic level, even being able to create stuff out of thin air. While Invincible was originally a comic, it has an animated series that's currently running that this game also takes inspiration from. The best way to describe this game's story is an alternate universe version of the plot from the comic with some story and character design changes from the animation. Being that this is a visual novel, you can change the direction of the story to shape Eve and her path as a superhero. One of the ways you can shape her path as a hero is by choosing different upgrades in her skill tree. You can choose to be an empath who uses kindness to get her way, a creator who comes up with unique solutions to problems, or a firebrand who says screw being nice and takes problems head on. Or you can be a combination of multiple of these three branches. You even unlock special abilities by multiclassing. Each branch can give you access to unique dialogue and choice options which can potentially open up new solutions to situations that weren't possible before. Your abilities aren't just used in the dialogue portions of the game though, they're also used in combat. Like I mentioned, this game is an RPG too, and several times throughout the game you'll be able to fight enemies in battle. The combat is honestly pretty solid. It has an action economy system where each action takes energy, and you only get a certain amount of energy that you can use each turn. One thing that I think makes the combat more thoughtful is that you can actually see what your enemies are going to do next, which allows you to really plan your next move. The combat isn't the deepest or most interesting thing that you've ever played, but you can't just spam attacks and win, and overall it is a nice change of pace from the visual novel sections of the game. I guess my only major complaint about the combat is that the visuals are not particularly great. There's definitely a nice visual style to this game, good use of color and nice looking character sprites, but the issue comes with the animation and the fact that there really isn't much of it. It's mostly a bunch of still images that slide around the screen. I think this style works for the game's cutscenes, which are done in a motion comic style, but in battle, the lack of animation makes the game feel kinda cheap. But to be fair, this game is pretty cheap, and I got it on sale, so I guess I can't complain too much. Given that the game is a budget title, it's not really long, about 5 hours long, which I think is a solid runtime. Because it's not particularly long, I decided to play this game twice. With these sorts of choice-driven story games, sometimes you gotta play them multiple times just to see if the choices that you made in your first playthrough actually mattered. You can make some choices that have an impact, I will admit, but most major events are pretty much set in stone and you can't really change the trajectory, which is unfortunate. All in all though, this is a decent game. Gundam Breaker 4 is a 2024 hack-and-slash third-person shooter game developed by Crafts and Meister, a Japanese development team that's worked on a number of licensed games like the fighting game Super Dragon Ball Z and the visual novel Code Geass Lost Colors. This game does have DLC that was recently released, and it seems like there will be more DLC released in the future, but I'm only going to be talking about the base game in this video. Gundam Breaker 4 is the fourth game in the Gundam Breaker series, where you create your own robot plastic model kit called a Gunpla, and battle against other robots alone or with friends. In the game story, you control a new player in the beta of an MMO where people all over the world battle each other with their Gunpla. Over the course of the game's story, you meet new friends and form a clan, slowly moving your way up through the ranks and making a name for yourselves. The story is honestly pretty generic. You can see where the story is going 90% of the time, and while it does have a few twists, most of them really aren't handled in an interesting way outside of one near the end of the game. The characters are your fairly standard anime tropes, although the game does at least try to develop them by giving each of them a character arc. As generic as the characters are, they were fun to watch, even if it was to just point out how many cliches they scratched out on their bingo cards. But obviously you don't play this game for the story, you play this game to build a Gunpla. By doing missions, you can acquire different Gunpla parts, and you can use those parts to customize your Gunpla. The amount of customization this game has is incredible. You can change everything from the Gunpla's head, to its arms, to the weapons that it holds in each of its hands, and so much more. The coolest part is that the equipment that you choose actually affects what your Gunpla can do in combat as well. For example, these missile launchers on my Gunpla's legs, those aren't just for decoration, you can actually use those in battle. This backpack that I have has cannons on it, and I can fire them for massive damage. Different melee weapons like swords, axes, and lances have different combos, and since you can wield up to 2 weapons at a time with one in each hand, you can use the different fighting styles of each one to create your own unique combos. Not only can you change the parts that you use, you can also customize the parts themselves with different paint jobs, weathering effects to make your gunpla look a bit more worn out and used, and you can even adjust the scale and placements of parts to really nail down the perfect look. As I mentioned before, you can get parts by grinding missions, but you may not always get the parts you want. Luckily, there is a shop where you can buy full kits of specific mecha from the various Gundam anime, manga, novels, etc. Those parts will typically be pretty low level, but fortunately, with the game's synthesis system, you can make your low level parts stronger by sacrificing higher level parts that you don't need or by using these parts enhancers, which will also increase the level of your parts. Speaking of synthesis, there's another feature called derivation synthesis, where you can fuse parts together to make new parts. Obviously, this game doesn't have every Gundam or mobile suit ever shown in the 45 years that the franchise has been around, but it does have a good roster of parts to pick from. My only major gripe with the gameplay is the combat, and that's because the combat isn't all that interesting. I can't speak on the PvP, but when it comes to PvE, doing combos is fun, but after a while, beating up on hordes of enemies over and over again does get repetitive. Occasionally you do get a boss fight against a huge enemy to spice things up, but overall the game does tend to get old. Fortunately, I think the novelty of making a cool gunpla lasts a long time. I've probably spent hours going through parts, customizing my gunpla, trying to make my ideal robot. And even if the combat isn't amazing, it's always cool seeing my new upgraded gunpla in action, at least for a little while. This is a game that I think works best in short bursts, maybe only an hour or 2 a day. Customize your gunpla, do a handful of missions, and end the session there. Then, the next time you play, use the parts that you got from the missions you did before to customize your gunpla, do some more missions, and so on and so on. The combat isn't amazing, but I think the plethora of options to build your gunpla and the admittedly entertaining characters made this a relatively fun experience for me. I don't think I'd recommend this game at full price, but for a good sale, it might be worth picking up. I think that's enough games for one day. Those who follow all of my content may have noticed that a portion of this video came from the second channel, and that's because I've decided to get rid of those videos on there and move them over here onto the main channel instead. After thinking it through, I realized that the videos on the second channel were basically the same as the videos I was doing on the main channel. I'll have to do some more thinking to decide what I want to do with the second channel in the future. I didn't want to just re-upload the old videos from there onto here, so I'll be making new videos that are mostly new content with some old bits incorporated into them. Sorry for the confusion, as I'm sure some of you were probably having deja vu. In any case, please be sure to let me know in the comments about any other licensed or tie-in games that I should check out. If you want to watch more videos like this, I have a whole playlist of videos where I look at licensed and tie-in games. That's all I've got to talk about for today though. So, thanks for watching y'all, and have a great rest of your day.